Ladies and gentlemen, hello again, and welcome back to Don't Worry About the Government. My name is Chris Novembrino. Joining me on the show today is Brian Halverson. I think both you and I are now at a restored state, a very restored Brian Halverson, and I'm fully hydrated Chris Novembrino.
I guess I'm restored in that I can now sleep with a little bit of peace at night, knowing that there's no more pins and needles over when the electricity may go out or come back, whether or not a pipe does or doesn't burst, uh, whether or not a tree falls onto the roof and through the roof. Uh, I believe those sorts of questions are over, and so now I can begin the dilemma of whether or not I sleep through the night. Because I actually can.
And
Man,
now it's entirely back on you again, is what you're saying.
I guess so. Yeah, and I'm looking out the window, and there's all this snow, and that's supposed to be. It's over. Like whatever joy there was that I had about snow.
Oh
I know
man,
you.
I enjoy snow. Like
I do, but
I lost several hours during the last few days at night just staying up and drinking coffee and staring out my window and watching the snow fall. Like I can lose myself in that simple thing for, I'm not joking, at least 60 minutes. At least easily 30. Easily
yeah,
30, but upwards of 60. I find it super calming. I just stand there with like a cup of coffee and like kind of just watch the snow pass by the lights, and I stare. There were some really big snowflakes, and that was really cool because I hadn't seen snow that, like, snowflakes that big since I was a kid. It'd been a really long time because I've seen snow since then, but it's always been kind of intermittent and stuff, and like, snow in Arizona is not snow. Then this was like real snow. It's like an actual snowstorm, light snowstorm, like especially Massachusetts compared, but
yeah.
like a snowstorm nonetheless. And for Texas, it's jarring. For me, terrifying, obviously, because you're always worried about power going out and you keep seeing all this stuff. But I was also like, well, until then, I'm just gonna let myself enjoy this moment. There's nothing here but these snowflakes.
Yeah. Yeah. Once I realized that we were not in the situation where other people around Austin were, where we're out of power for like 24 to 48 hours, I'm not on Austin's. I live in Dripping Springs, so I'm on a different power provider
Oh, sure.
who, who, from the minute this started, they were doing cycles. And apparently, there were a few places that had some inordinate uh, uh, blackouts, but in certain spots. But apparently, our electric company did a lot better than what most people are hearing coming out of Austin. But I've
Yes.
got friends. I've got friends that are in Austin now that between the water getting shut off, then being told to get water somewhere else and then boil it. And then if you don't have a gas stove, how do you boil it? uh, Going to HEB, going to the grocery store and getting in finally and there being nothing there. Or getting into the line and then the power goes out and they can't take your card and they won't take cash. Uh, wow. I like uh, I've I've never experienced anything like this, at least in this country, and I'm trying to imagine when I've been somewhere else where the people of that country were going through this.
So real quickly here, let like I've got other things to say, but Moral Maze just kind of like popped into my head here. That program on BBC. I don't know if they're still doing it, but I used to love that show. Okay, you're online. To use the British parlance on this, with your groceries. Power goes out. You need these fucking groceries. They won't take cash because they can't work their registers at this point. Are you stealing the groceries?
Well, apparently there is an HEB, and by the HEB is the name of a grocery chain around here. I don't
Yes,
know if
yeah,
they
yeah,
have
yeah.
it.
Yeah. No, that's good. I mean, you know how
Yeah,
they are. And like,
yeah,
we have a large enough audience where that matters. We try to make sure.
yeah. So apparently there was one where the power went out, and they told dozens of people just to take their cart home.
That's the right answer for the store. No, I'm saying I'm stealing it, but like, no, like the right answer.
yeah.
No, I'm not. Yeah, look, I'd feel bad about it. I'd even offer to pay it back in the future. And I would. It's, but I'm also not going to be like, well, them's the rules. I guess I'm just not going to eat. Like, fuck that.
Yeah, if I had cash on me, I would just throw it towards someone and then say, "You make it work," because I'm leaving with this stuff. And
Hopefully, this cash makes you get over this. Yeah.
like I'm willing to tip for them to just go through the whole transaction process. Take a screenshot or take a picture of what's in my cart, and
I'll go and defend it before a jury. There's not a jury, not a jury in the country that's going to convict me. I will flip that one juror. You'll never get a guilty verdict. Not ever. Not ever.
Was it Henry Fonda in 12 Angry Men who flipped the whole room?
Yes.
Wasn't it Henry Fonda?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't think you need to be Henry.
You actually don't have to do that. You actually don't have to do that. You know what's crazy is that movie warped the older generation's mind enough that I remember getting shown that in high school as an educational film.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, it's a fun movie. Like it's especially if you're into character actors, it's like one of the great classic character actors movies.
Yes.
But it's a terrible representation of how government actually works. It's like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington as an understanding of how government actually works. Like they're bad exemplars. All right. Anyways, so any other good Blizz stories for us?
Blizz stories?
Yeah, Blizz stories, baby.
Okay. So whenever I'm going through adventures, I don't know, like a natural disaster, I kind of look through my books and try and find something relatable where maybe at another time I wasn't that interested in the book. And this is something I knew one day I would be interested in. This is Nature at its Strangest. This is true stories from the files of the Smithsonian Institution's Center for Short-Lived Phenomenon. And what's ironic about this is, maybe ironic, is the Smithsonian Institute, the Center for Short-Lived Phenomena was only open for 7 years.
Short-lived.
So apparently
A phenomenon unto itself that also had a short shelf life.
Yeah, so I first of all, I can't get over that. But
it's funny.
There's so many things. Black snow falls on Christmas morning. Giant snails invade a major city. A man and his date drive home from a party and the road disappears. How could it happen? Apparently, it goes through legitimate stuff as well as the guy with the party and the road disappearing.
Is that just a sinkhole?
I don't know.
Well, no, I'm just trying to think of like what could that possibly be? Like, no, open the book. Actually, you know what? You literally you're holding the book. Get the book. Tell us what's going on there. All right, I'll vamp for you, I guess, real quickly because like this is important to me.
But each one of these stories is fascinating.
Yeah.
All right, so. Where have all the puffins gone?
Where have they gone?
The super bees of Brazil, the killer whales attack, fire in the lake, the poisoned sheep, the sad saga of Susie.
I'm here for Disappearing Road.
I'm looking.
Okay.
The plant of mysterious death. Man, see, I read that. I'm forgetting about the sinkhole.
I know. There's a lot.
Earthquake.
This book is really a podcast unto itself.
A brown wave of ants, the bloody tide, the burning soil, The fatal flowers, the floating island, the coral killers, the monster that wasn't, the monster that wasn't,
The floating
uh,
island.
invasion of
That's
the giant snails, the volcano that fell in. Uh,
don't all
I,
volcanoes fall in?
I guess we'd have to read it to find
I
out.
mean, like it looks. I mean, technically it's an eruption, so it's a spout out. But like, I mean, you could just as easily think of it as like a collapse of sorts.
What's yeah, what's nice about this book is, or at least one of the reasons it attracts me is, you get these animations with each one of these stories that is very 70s.
Oh
Early,
yeah, 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 yeah.
yeah. I I'm a sucker for that, especially when it's a book that they're otherwise gonna put in some remainder pile.
So you're
So
just
yeah.
you're not gonna give me Disappearing Road. Like you're
Oh,
look. All right.
okay, so how about we tease the audience
I
for
see
next
what you're I
episode?
see what you're doing. You're just trying to get yourself back on the show again.
Oh man.
Man, that's
Trying to,
relentless. That's relentless.
this is my shoehorn right here. This is my
Yeah, no,
shoehorn.
that's solid marketing. All right, let me I'll give you. I got Blizz stories here. So I had to go to the grocery store, and that was we were talking about that a moment ago. Like that was a pretty lame experience. I kind of did a quick inventory after day one of the blizzard, and I was like, I don't know. I'm fine, but if I get to the store today, I'd feel a little bit better about supplies and everything like that. And ultimately, that was a good choice. But I went there. There were a ton of people there. They had lost power, and I've been reading about this all over the state where stores are losing power, and when they lose power, it results in all the freezers. All those freezer aisles, they all have to get taped off. They are throwing a lot of that stuff away, which has been resulting in people dumpster diving. I, I, it sounds much crueler than it is. Liability wise, once the thaw on frozen stuff goes, you really do need to pull it from the shelves. You can't just be giving it to people. At the same time, you wouldn't want to be throwing it away. I understand that. At the same time, again, it's a blizzard, so it's under freezing outside, so everything's getting thrown back out into a frozen environment, which does mean, if you really want to get the food at that point, it's probably liability wise the fastest way to do it, and it's not as risky as it would be if it was like 80 degrees out and the food was in a dumpster.
Right.
It's a different
Right.
thing. And again, these are all wrapped things. You know, like
Yeah.
the boneless Tyson chicken wings or whatever. It's wrapped. It may have thought it might have, it might have thought and refrozen or whatever. But even if it's sitting in a bag in a dumpster, it's sitting in a bag, and it's also in its individual unit thing. So like all the stuff is actually ultimately fine. I've seen the videos though, and everyone's like, "What is this, a third world country?" And I get it, but I also understand how we end up there, and it doesn't perturb me as much as I think it may some people. The bigger issue though is that because of this, what's left in the store is much more limited. And by the time I was going to get my stuff, which was at like around 11:30 a.m., so it was pretty early on day one, shelves were getting pretty raided. And lots of key items totally gone. Lots of vegetables totally gone. It was as bad as the start of the pandemic, like that phase. So I do worry that food scarcity might have been a problem for some people. Much in the same way, as we were getting ready to tape here, I was able to rescue one of the two cats I threw up on Don't Worry About the Government on the Twitter here. I'll put this episode out pretty quickly. If you hear this show and you want an adorable orange cat and want to be a hero, do it. Otherwise, he's going to probably find his way to the animal shelter. But like tonight's going to be another really cold night. And tomorrow probably will be too. So I think the first warm-ish day will be Saturday going into Sunday. But yeah. Anyways, point being,
Yeah. One of my
Supplies are
Go
limited.
ahead.
No, yeah, that's
Yeah.
my end is supplies are limited. Go ahead.
One of my first jobs when I was a teenager was at a grocery store, and I knew very quickly I didn't want to bag groceries and go outside in Dallas, you can imagine. So I got into receiving. I would break down the trucks whenever they would come in, and
Sure.
so I was in the back room. I was tearing down the trucks and breaking them down by aisle, the regular stock, the frozen, the dairy, and all the stuff, and so I would always see whenever things would get thrown out. And of course, I start questioning this, and there's the manager, the receiving dock manager. He's aware of the whole process. He knows the limitations of it. He's not 15-year-old Brian who was like, but why can't we feed more people with this food? But I remember, like, there were like groups of people that, like, you would call, and they had to get there within like so many hours, or else they would throw away this food. And it just bothered the shit out of me, just because at 15 years old, you're not thinking about legalities. You're thinking about, there's people that are hungry. How come the
Yeah.
people can't eat? And you can see a lot of that sentiment on Twitter already, but also a lot of that sentiment goes to, well, look at Venezuela and look at us, and we obviously arrived at this place in our food chain, or in our food chain, in our industry, with the same way that Venezuela did, of course.
These are also people who don't really understand how the grocery supply chain works and how it's different from even like 50 years ago. How much food they have on stock and how much supplies they have on stock versus 20, 30, 40 years ago. Totally different. To that point, though, what should be hopefully eye-opening here, we'll see. We've had two events, though, like this in 12 months, is that we are very susceptible to food disruptions. And in the case of a power outage like this, it's really rough because the power's out, and like down here in Dallas, like in Texas and specifically, we don't really have the ability to plow Texas. Texas is not budgeted for plowing. God help us if we ever tried to put that into the state budget. Taxes would be going up, buddy. Yeah, like, and nor, so we wouldn't do that. It would make no sense to, though. You know what I mean? Like the amount of plows that you'd actually need to get ready to plow Texas would be like ridiculous. Talking about plowing the second biggest state in the nation, a nation that does not do plowing. Whoa, in our fields, but not on our roads.
Yeah, and with roads like ours, typically you can patch a road with some blacktop, or here and there, and when you have a climate like ours, that doesn't lead to catastrophe. But if you do that with roads up north,
can't do it.
You can't. It doesn't get done. Because you would have a terrible problem on your hands. And so
that's actually another good point. Oh, good, but you go ahead. Yeah.
No. That's it. These are just the dynamics that at some point I don't find cause in looking for someone to blame. There are some things where people are to blame.
Some of this stuff. Let's talk about the narrative thing too, because like there is an impulse to take what is happening here in Texas this week and shoehorn it into a narrative. And if someone is going to do that, or has the impulse to do that, I think it is valid in one respect only. If you want to talk about this event as a global warming event, a climate change related event, the evidence is surely there. I'm going to hop onto Google here real quickly.
And while you're hopping onto Google, what on this sort of battlefront, so to speak, as far as the war for the narrative, I think the GOP knew they were going to lose to some degree over this subject. And because they knew they were going to lose, they went on the offensive with wind. Because if you go on the offensive with wind and it turns out you're wrong, you go on the offensive with wind, they counter back, and you're still where you were. So if you know you're going to lose, you go ahead and go on the offensive anyway, if you're the GOP. That's nothing new for them, but it just seems that that's the state of the last 2 hour or 2 days of this narrative, especially relating to Abbott or Governor Abbott.
I've got the Guardian copy is poorly written. I can't believe I'm using USA Today. But I'll read a little bit of this. There is evidence that climate change can weaken the polar vortex, which allows. So up north, there is a vortex that kind of keeps all the cold air pocketed up north. It's essentially like it kind of like pushes itself in. So you get this breakdown that's apparently happened. I was looking at another copy that said that a part in the Arctic actually got the warmest that it has been in about 100 years. And that scans and tracks sort of causally with how Texas is experiencing a cold front that it hasn't experienced in 100 years. And so I think that there is a very direct cause and effect weather story here. And if you want to talk about that and a changing environment on the planet that we need to be mindful of, I'm very open to this story in service of that narrative. But that's not what I'm talking about when I'm talking about shoehorning this into narratives. Like you brought up the windmills thing that the Fox News Republicans have latched onto. But then we also have on our side of the aisle, we have we can talk about my thoughts about calling them the liberals in this sense later on. Actually, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. Here's the thing. I have my own rhetoric for a reason. The Democratic establishment and the Bidenists, and like the blue checks and like the Biden boosters and those sorts of people, they have kind of latched onto the Murph, this is blue states bailing red states out sort of thing. And it's obnoxious. It's absolute. It's gross and it's obnoxious. But then there is the third tranche of people who have taken this as an opportunity to prove why they're better than that aforementioned group I just mentioned. And it's like, see, this is why we're better than the libs. Which is nice, except in the case of all three of these groups, I don't think any of them have given a single dollar to a North Texas food bank or a South Texas food bank, have given to a homeless shelter down here. I would just invite everyone, and I know they're all listening. That's what, broad reach here. But I would invite all of them to every time they fire off one of those tweets or a comment on Facebook or TikTok or wherever fine thoughts about the world are being purveyed these days, to maybe take $1 out of their wallet and kick it to a charity down here in Texas to show how much you really fucking care. And outside of that, I don't actually necessarily give that much of a shit about any of these other people. I see enough cruelty and pettiness inside of my own state with my own politicians to be getting it from people from Astoria, Queens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chris, that USA Today article you have, does it start with
I'm sorry.
record cold?
It does. Record cold, the Ted.
Okay, so that's the one I was trying to illustrate for another. Speaking of USA Today, I'm ready to shit all over them. If you would like to get into that now, since we're on since you were just looking at this article, so. The main problem I have with this article is it's emblematic of how the media attempts to to engage with as many people on a link as possible. So for instance, this subject of global warming, whenever you look at this article and you read through it, you realize that the writer definitely is not confronting whether climate change is real or not. They're trying to illustrate what the polar vortex is.
Yes.
They're trying to give you kind of what was that called? The Cribs notes, or what do you call them?
The shorthand.
The shorthand, yeah, the shorthand on the subject, because it is a difficult subject to understand. But if you look at this, that the contents of this article, is there anything about this where you could say someone who doesn't believe that climate change is real is just going to start reading this and absorbing the entire content?
No.
No,
One of
exactly.
the problems I think is like I just flashed up on the screen here this chart that this is from January, and like kind of the other key part of this is it's called sudden stratospheric warming, and this they've been looking at this since January, so they sort of knew this last storm is connected to this thing that has happened called sudden stratospheric warming. But you look at that article, the USA Today article, and we're good here. But you look at that USA Today article, and there's not enough graphs, and I don't think they do a very good job connecting it causally. And to your point, I think there's still trepidation about talking on the subject of climate change.
Well, the way that I feel they really crossed the line is with their headline. As you know, if you read a headline that you disagree with, if you are so intense in your disagreement with it, you might be likely to retweet that headline because you're going to riff off of it. You're going to counter it in an artful way, let's say. And so this headline, I believe,
And also the draft version of the headline. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah.
Is global warming behind record cold?
So I believe this headline was manufactured in order to attract all the people who were never going to read this article to begin with.
USA Today is horrible.
Record cold, intense storms, and tornadoes amid global warming. So within this partial sentence, you've got record cold and global warming within a few words of one another. And if you are a conservative, that's all you need to get triggered. You see the word cold and warm next to one another, and then, oh, look at these scientists about to tell me how cold leads to warm.
I'll give you a contra example, like to kind of illustrate Brian's point a little bit further here. Look at this Bloomberg copy of how the warming Arctic helped drive a deep freeze into Texas. And this is again, we're looking at Bloomberg here. Now, granted, this is Bloomberg Green, so obviously a bastion of left thinking. No, but I'm sure they're a perfectly reputable publication too. That was not the joke here. But it starts off first line, lead line. The Earth's poles are warming faster than anywhere on the planet. While the consequences of that aren't completely understood, it's becoming apparent that many of the world's extreme weather events owe the Arctic at least some credit. That does such a better job putting into context the cause and effect thing that's happening there than the USA Today copy.
Right. It tells you I'm about to explain something that at first glance doesn't make sense. Whereas the other one, it just starts talking.
Right, yeah. Hot and cold at the same time. How can this be?
Yeah, and we are 5 years away. We are only 5 years away from when Senator Inhofe or Congress?
Yeah. James Inhofe.
When James Inhofe brought a snowball onto the House floor or into the Senate chambers in order to show how global warming isn't real. And he tossed it at the I forget who he tossed it at. That wasn't the point, but I always wonder how that went as far as like the look on the guy's face when he caught the snowball. I kind of wish I was in that room.
I know you like they wouldn't censure you for that, but I think about that and go like what's the largest object one member of Congress could hurl at another member of Congress before actually facing impeachment? On it? like some sort of like ethics. They don't do it. They can, but technically it's ambiguous. Anyways, point being,
I think a spittoon is the answer. You can throw your spittoon at
with tobacco, like with chaws.
I can just imagine. You know that happened.
Oh,
you know that should happen.
Surely, if you throw the spittoon with dip in, yeah, you're getting an ethics charge. I feel like I feel like it's got to be less than that though. It's got to be like stone. Like, you know, it's something. Spittoon's pretty
Well,
drastic.
all I'm saying is it was a better day when every single member of Congress had a spittoon next to their desk. And you have the opportunity to possess that self-control or to let it go. You know what I mean? And now, well, what are you going to do? What self-control are they actually wielding right now?
No, you're
They're
right.
not.
It's a commentary on impulse control.
Yeah, there you
Yeah,
go.
yeah. Having a spittoon.
So chewing tobacco is the Faust. We got rid of chewing tobacco as a plague on society, but
Yeah,
the
what like
Faustian bargain.
so many times people don't think about trade-offs in politics, right? Like you're getting one thing. It's like what I'm always talking about with green energy, where it's like the energy is green, but like maybe the battery technology isn't. This is like that, but dumb. It's,
I'm
okay,
gonna take that as a compliment and move on.
yeah, why not? So I've got another thing here that I wanted to talk about. My apartment complex, the best apartment complex in the world. Get me out of this horrible place. Did I mention when I talked about rescuing these cats, the reason these cats are out of an apartment right now is because people abandoned them because they got a notice 3 weeks ago saying we want to do unit checks and you've got to pay deposits and fees if you have any animals that aren't documented. So what happens? All these animals get turned out right before a giant winter storm. I'm on Twitter today. I'm seeing footage of animals getting frozen. So like, yeah, no, it sucks. Screw these people. Don't move into this apartment complex. You'll see the name on the screen here. Anyways. So we received this text. Siren emoji, siren emoji. FEMA is finally here in Texas. If you're still without power and need a place to warm up, clean up, and sleep until things restore, FEMA is paying for hotels. Again, like we're in apartments. So, like, if my apartment complex can't give you food, shelter, or at least shelter through the end of this, something's broken in your brains. FEMA is paying for hotels. 800. I'm not going to read the number. If you know of anyone who needs it, press 1 for Texas disaster relief and follow prompts. You will need to know the following: pen, paper, date of disaster, social security number, address, income, and home and insurance information. The process should take about 20 to 30 minutes to complete. So that came in at 9 a.m. this morning from my apartment complex, who thought they'd pass along that handy information about FEMA. 3 hours later, the apartment complex realizes FEMA scam. Dear residents, unfortunately, the information that we shared with residents regarding FEMA is a scam. Please do not call this number and provide them with any personal information.
This is like the beginning of Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Oh my God.
Dude, this line at the end has been killing me all day. We apologize for the inconvenience and we'll update you with any additional information we can provide. We apologize for the inconvenience of maybe giving your social security information out to hackers. Unfucking believable. Like this management company, the place was managed by a different place 2 years ago, or up till 2 years ago, and these people who took over are dumb and horrible. And don't worry about the government. It's not just the name of this show. It is my axiom for disaster preparedness. Because what I have realized is at a local level and at an extremely local level, you're surrounded by boobs and nincompoops. You need to be prepared.
Man, on that note, I am extremely thankful for the neighbors that I do have. One of my direct neighbors works for the city, a city adjacent to Dripping Springs, and he works for the water supply. And just to be able to bounce things off of him, like, should I shut my water off at the main, or should I see if what happens, or man, that you really are at the mercy of the people around you, and most people don't know the people around them these days. You're befriending
That's
people.
the worst part of this in the
Yeah,
pandemic is the breakdown
yeah.
of any neighborliness.
The bowling aloneisms. Yeah,
Yes, well, in a weird way, I mean, it's rough. Like I have one neighbor, and she and I she's really into dogs. I'm very into cats, and like we are friends in the sense that like we will like look out for stray animals and be like, kind of give each other the scoop if we see something. Like she's looking out for that other cat for me. But she and I, we stand at a distance and we're like, we're mindful of that stuff. But if I see her and I want to go and say hi, I have to go and grab my mask and get ready for it. And
hmm
I used to like let the neighbors come by and like, see the cats through the windows, and I'd have the windows open, and like kids would know me, and I'd be kind of friendly with the kids. Like there'd be some sort of neighborliness. I've been very mindful not to, I've been, trying to look out for the animals. But I've been mindful about the people because it's like, yeah, I want to help people. And if I really see someone in need, I'm going to help them. But there's still a pandemic going. So the pandemic is broken down our in a rational way, but it's still broken it down, our empathy. And
yeah.
a thing I was talking about way before this pandemic began was the crisis of empathy. That people like Rush Limbaugh, who we'll talk about to wrap up the show here at the way later on, really helped to promote, right? Like laughing at liberals and like miserable liberals and all of that shit. Like this whole culture of unempathy and how it's fun to beat up people.
Feminazis.
Yes, feminazis, and which persists to this day in what I was just talking about a moment ago with taking this disaster in Texas and using it as a chance to go scoreboard and stick it to the Republicans or the liberals, or whoever.
Because they started it, right?
Yes, right, and the way you'll really help the people in Texas is if you'll tell them who the real ghouls are who are making their lives miserable. Not actually trying to get them relief right now. Not trying to get cold people inside, but telling them who's part of the broad meta narrative of that's been jacking up their life. In this sense, Rush Limbaugh very much a thought leader on that front, an innovator on that front. But like, man, I've been reading articles all this week. I just want to read a little bit more, like what I guess preoccupies me on all this stuff. And here we go. Yeah. Yeah, no, no, you don't get to know my location. Oh no, bullshit. Share screen again. We're trying this again. It wants to know my location, but is it showing the location thing or is it showing? I okay.
It said show locate. It had a screen that says show location or
Okay. Well, here. How about this? And now it looks good, right? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. So, I mean, here are the people who really need the help, right? Like, it's John Henderson and his wife complaining that her wife's throat is hurting because she can't use her oxygen tanks
yeah.
because it's getting so cold that the oxygen tanks don't work. And, like, yeah, there's state and local services. Some of it, like, people are down the cops, but man, like the fire department, like how awesome in so many ways, in so many mundane ways, is the fire department on a regular basis. And like this is yet another example of them. San Antonio Fire Department going by houses and refilling the tanks of people who are without oxygen.
Yeah.
But that's like the real struggle. Power goes out in your house, you're on an oxygen tank. How are you going to breathe? Coronavirus making breathing harder. Who else here? People getting, we talked about people being stuck without food. People who have been eating sandwiches while the power is out and cooking while it's on, which is what I was prepared to do and what I stocked up to do. I mean, that's just what you got to do. As I mentioned too, if you're ever stuck in a snowstorm, it's always cold enough that you can keep all of your groceries outside in the cold and it'll actually keep like all your frozen stuff frozen. So, that is a move. You don't necessarily have to lose the food, is what I'm saying. But it's still a crisis. People having to use blankets to keep the air out. People trying to do a charcoal grill to grill some sort of food to have something warm to eat.
Yeah, we had some people in Austin die because they tried to do that inside their house. And you saw the vent from the attic spilling out like charcoal dust.
Oh.
Man.
And like, I guess this is the other thing where I sort of go like, this crisis just doesn't fit easily into some of these narratives, which is there is, for people who live in snow, and who are used to living in snow, there is an institutional knowledge of snow. Like we were talking about how you can't plow Texas, right? Like plowing is but a microcosm of this bigger macro issue of like everyone at a state and local level, at an administrative level, and at like a regular citizenry level, we don't have preparation for snow. I'm somewhat well prepared for this. I didn't have enough thermal stuff. I was kicking myself. I was doing my inventories like, you should have better thermal stuff than this, Novembrino. Like,
Yeah,
if I really need to layer up as in a crisis, but like, I don't have a shovel, Brian. I have none shovels. I have a spare heater, sure. And like, I had a rescue plan. I had food and water. I had perishable and non-perishable. Like, I had a lot of that stuff, but still missed a few spots. If I had to shovel my way out of something, that was fucked. I was gonna be making a shovel. Like it was. And that was true for everyone here. People just don't own shovels.
Yeah, I live in a place where a shovel is pretty, or I've got a few trees in the front yard and the backyard, and they need maintenance, and there's all sorts of things here and there and everywhere. We got a garden going on, or we were about to, I
But
guess.
that's a regular shovel and not a snow shovel.
That's correct. I do
Yeah,
not
yeah.
own a snow shovel, and that's one of those. Yeah, like if I'm going
Which seems like a small distinction, but like the
yeah,
amount of shoveling you have to do when there's snow, like a regular garden shovel is not going to cut it.
yeah, and also what is kind of what helps to understand the exactly how strange this storm is we first got dumped on with snow that fell when it was like 0 degrees outside, and so this is really powdery snow, and it packs up. It forms snowbanks in certain places. And so after that, we got about anywhere from a tenth to a quarter-inch sheet of ice over that snow. And then things started thawing out in the day, but then freezing at night. So underneath the powder snow starts to become this layer of ice that wasn't there originally. So you have ice, powder, ice. And I just growing up around Dallas and now living in Austin, I know that when we have ice storms, it's an ice storm, and it was never coupled with a snowstorm. And the ice storm, Dallas, Austin, they have trucks to put, salt or sand on the bridges, but that amount of machinery in order to take care of an ice storm coupled with a snowstorm, it's just not it's not the same. Like we were talking about, either with the roads or with owning this heavy equipment like this, it's not in our budget. It's just not there.
Yeah, and it's not in our budget. It would be, and it would be a real debacle to try to scale. You'd be talking. I don't think this is. I say I don't think this is going to become a trend. I'll tell you, it's a problem. If we start having one or two of these a year, that's enough for Texas to have to really start thinking about having something in the budget for it.
I don't really think they're going to do an upgrade, considering how much Biden has attached climate change to jobs. I see this as some sort of solar voucher program, where instead of actually improving the grid, they allow the grid to not be taxed in ways that it used to be taxed.
Man,
and you let the grid rot.
The worst part about the Republican conservative narrative shoehorn is that it has turned the discussion into an energy generation discussion instead of an energy storage an energy grid and distribution discussion.
Well, that's not a polarizing argument.
No, it doesn't serve anyone's politics particularly well. Because even when it's not an inherently, it's boring, but it also like it sort of necessarily illustrates why there's always this relationship between state, local, and federal, and like that, to your point, is both boring, but also is not useful to a burn it down narrative, or sort of illustrates why a burn it down narrative is actually bad. Because like power distribution at the end of the day, like when you want to do like the power grid, one, you don't want to be building it from scratch. Two, it illustrates that you can't just tear down the power grid, and you can't just go without the power grid either. You know, like you could if we were all living in the 18th or 19th century, but like if we're talking about going without the power grid now, you know, you're talking about living in like the Walking Dead sort of era, a post 20th century in the dark way. Yeah, no, but that's what I think the issue is. The issue is you don't have enough energy stored. In the case of the demands, the amount of energy that would need to be on deck to handle this, and this is why I really do think it's a storage thing, was five, or like not five, but it might have been like 2 or 3 times as much as the average consumption for this time of year. I remember seeing the chart and what they had anticipated for this time of year, and generally would anticipate in the high end and the low end, and then what was actually required. We were nowhere close. And so to that point, what you need to have on hand is a strategic power reserve. And then that gets into a question of building that site. What are the resources that need to go in to serve as a strategic power storage for that kind of location? And, you know, making sure that that site, wherever that site is, and that's going to be a big problem in and of itself, is also safe, so that you're storing all this energy in a safe way. And that's like, that to me, to your point, I do think Biden, as the Republicans are, is going to make this all about energy generation. And to get into that narrative a little bit more, I mean, my understanding is that the issue is that the fossil fuel side of the producers are actually under where they should be at this time of year. And it's not so much that the alternative energies are like renewable energies. I would stop calling them alternative. They might be the dominant one at some point. Renewable energies like wind and solar actually have been producing at scale, if not a little bit better. But the bigger issue is that gas and coal, they had been not producing at the average pace. Does that sound right to you?
Right.
Or am I making
Right. No, the problem with the argument as it was posed is it was simply stated that wind underperformed, and because wind underperformed, Greg Abbott's specific language was, because wind underperformed, it thrust natural gas into a different, poorer outcome. When that's not true at all. One doesn't you don't.
So it's a cause and effect thing. So it's not even just it's not, no, petroleum's doing fine. It's, yes, indeed, they're doing bad, and it's all wind's fault.
On Tuesday, we were producing more wind power than expected.
Yeah.
We were just expecting less than the summertime. In some months, wind accounts for over half of our power, and in months like this, it is predictably 10% or less. And so when Abbott spins it as though wind let us down, there was no one who thought that this came out of nowhere. What let us down, what surprised us, was the natural gas outcomes. And that has nothing to do with the wind outcomes. The wind outcomes performed slightly better than they thought they would.
I also, living in Texas, and this will be very parochial for just a second. Like this whole episode's, I guess, trying to make the parochial a little more national and international for people who listen from all these other places because they like the show. It's a perspective on Texas. In Texas, one of the things the Republican legislators have been very proud of is this thing called the Rainy Day Fund, which is kind of almost to me becoming a bit of a punchline now because it's like, how many rainy days have to occur before you use the money? Like, was this not a rainy day? But they should have something similar to that when it comes to power, right? That sensibility of having a surplus on hand. This to me is typically when I think about what's good about conservatism. This idea of having stuff on hand so that you're ready for a crisis. That's always been my understanding of conservatism, not so much the practice of it. But that thing should also translate over to power, and that's not even necessarily a green versus gas thing, right? Like that's just you should always have a little bit extra power on hand so that you can dump reserves if you need to.
Right. Yeah, and I'm trying to find the link that was might need to go back a little, which it explains kind of what we just went over. I don't want people to just take my word for it, but let's see here. Here we go. Let's see.
Brian forcing me into the fix it and post scenario here with this quote.
Yes. Oh, damn it. No. Damn it, I thought I sent this to you. Let's see here. There we go. Good Lord. Just before that. I gotta be almost there.
This better be a great quote.
No, it's the data which shows that the power that we were predicting. Here it goes. I'm going to send this to you here.
Okay. And now explain it so that I can use it on the show.
Yes. Here we go. Send to you here. All right, I just sent it to you. Okay, so this is Professor Catherine Hayhoe, at K. Hayhoe. The main factor is frozen instruments at natural gas, coal, and even nuclear facilities, as well as the limited supplies of natural gas. Wind shutdowns accounted for less than 13% of outages. Let's see here.
While wind can sometimes produce as much as 60% of total electricity in Texas, the resource tends to ebb in the winter, so the grid operators typically assume that the turbines will only generate about 19 to 43% of their maximum output. That said, I recall on different copy that some of the wind generations on the coastline actually were able to offset anything that was frozen. And to that point, even so, the wind generations actually exceeded the grid operators' daily forecast through the weekend. So it's not that wind generation has been dogging. And in the case of the frozen turbines thing, even that was fixed by the fact that wind on the coast was not freezing the turbines. And also, that is a easily remedied thing with technology. Like if you're really worried about that, that's a one-time thing. That's not it is certainly not the case that it is inherent that if you build a windmill, it will freeze. It is the case at some point all of them will freeze, like I don't know, like 50 below zero or whatever. Like that, but you can make oils and materials and stuff that is extremely resistant to cold at that level.
Right. And in that article, if you notice that word exceeded was hyperlinked, the link I just sent you is the hyperlink from exceeded. And
Okay.
that is the data that shows the power that we actually received on that day. And this is straight from ERCOT.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay, I'm gonna put this on the screen. I'm not really sure what I'm looking at. I mean, I am, but like it's not one of those charts where you're like, oh, you know?
right.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
very
yeah.
strange to look at.
It's a weird chart.
Yeah.
But it does seem, I think, to suggest that generation. Oh, okay. The green line here is what actually happened
Right.
versus the red and the blue line. And so it basically it peaked out at higher levels than was expected. Um and that was, I mean, it was actually even beating annual estimates. And like this sort of makes sense cuz the wind has been blowing pretty strongly the last several days. So yeah, no, I mean all this stuff makes sense ultimately. So what we need to talk about now is the issue in Texas of we have bad politicians. So I think less known, but certainly should not be ignored, is the mayor of Austin, a Democrat, going to Cancun. Or didn't he go to Cancun as well?
He went to Mexico.
He went to Mexico.
I was hoping they went to the same
Oh,
place, but
I know, right? Yeah. No, for real. So like,
that was in December.
yeah, that was not during this.
Right.
Okay.
That was here. I'll
Oh,
try to
that
go
was
into
that.
it.
You're right. That was for the holidays or whatever.
Right.
Yeah,
That was
and it was like, oh, this is bullshit. I thought he did this during this crisis.
no.
Okay, no, that's been reheated to try to equivocate what Cruz is doing, because here's the deal. That was pretty shitty from that Democratic mayor, and don't
Right.
think, y'all, that I have forgotten about, let's share screen again. Don't think I've forgotten about my friend Chris Murphy here, who was yelling at Republicans last year about people are dying, man. Millions are on the brink of hunger and eviction, and just last week was scolding us that they needed to go home to do district work. And you know what district work periods are like. To that point, might I just say, I bet you nothing got done during this district work week, if you really think about it. And all these states down south, because all these guys had to hunker down. So what they should have been, and where they would have been most useful to all of us, is on Capitol Hill. Um, you
Yeah.
know? Yeah. Like, yeah, the Republicans going into this week would have been like, I can't believe there's an impeachment trial going on in the midst of a snowstorm. But the alternative is literally Ted Cruz goes to Cancun. So you choose your adventure here. Which one do you sounds closer to governance? So Chris Murphy told us last week, don't spread this going on vacation crap. Well, yeah, you did. Or as Chris Cruz put it, they got home for Valentine's Day. All of this stuff is still fresh on my mind. I don't give the Democrats a pass on this crap at all on any level. I'll tell you, wasn't even really comfortable with Joe Biden doing TV appearances and the whole CNN thing during the midst of this snowstorm, talking about reopening schools. We'll talk about reopening schools on a different show. I got long thoughts on that. But I was uncomfortable with him doing anything other than talking about how he's going to help people in the middle of this blizzard. Because when you literally have millions of people out of power in the midst of a pandemic, that is crisis on top of crisis. I don't get it, man. I don't get it. It pisses me off. And oh, by the way, if you want to yell at Biden about something, and that's a thing of yours, that's a good one to yell at him about. Just saying. Great time to yell. Yeah, I mean, they like to do it. So, I guess it's just been frustrating.
So with Steve
Ted
Adler
Cruz.
though,
Steve Adler.
with the difference with Steve Adler and Ted Cruz here is really the audiences who are using them to illustrate the points their respective points. And so with Ted Cruz, you have the valid point of we need your help with this natural disaster that the entire state of Texas agrees is happening. No one is saying that this is not a natural disaster. Now, on the flip side, the people who were mainly objectionable to what Steve Adler did were the Republicans. It should have been everybody, but the Republicans were the loudest voices, crying foul about Steve Adler. The problem is Steve Adler was doing this in the middle of a quarantine, and a lot of people that are criticizing Steve Adler for doing what he did also don't believe the quarantine is valid. So what exactly are these people complaining about?
It's this view from nowhere. So to your point, what they are saying is both sides do it, and their biggest complaint, which is why I'd like to just stick my hand up on this one, is they go, and you guys never hold your politicians to the same standard. There's a double standard, and all of you liberals, the way they use it, not the way the left uses it, all of you liberals, you're willing to give a pass to anyone who's a Democrat on this stuff. And here's this example, and that example, and blah, 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 blah. Okay, no, my point is, yes, but like literally, there's nobody who does this worse than Ted Cruz. You name a bad thing. At this point, the only thing Ted Cruz does not have is a Me Too story. And do you really want to put money down that Ted Cruz doesn't have a Me Too story in the closet? Would you want to bet the kids on that one? Yeah. Put your firstborn child down on that? I don't think so. In this case, Ted Cruz, I want to read his statement. Not only does he get popped on this, his defense of this is low. Now, do you have the thing? I'm now having the no copyitis. I thought I had it. I feel really. I can't believe I have no copyitis. But it was like I want to spend time with my kid or some shit. It was blaming his children.
Here it goes. No, that's just a small piece of it.
I mean, if it's the thing about the kids, just read that. That's fine.
Oh yeah. Let me go back down. Ted Cruz, speaking now about his Cancun trip, says he began to have regrets right as he got on the plane. He says he understands why people are upset with him. So this is Ted Cruz once he gets back home speaking. There's some problems with this, with the story he's unraveling here.
Here, one second. Let me reset this for the final edit.
Sure.
All right. So Ted Cruz puts out this statement, and in Ted Cruz fashion, Ted Cruz doesn't blame himself, does not stick his hand up and go, I'm responsible for this one. Because, if you're not going to do it for the Capitol riot, why would you ever do it for anything ever again in your life, really? I mean, you might do it almost as an ironic rib on people. Ted Cruz is taking ownership for a thing he obviously did. He's trolling us. But Ted Cruz says in his statement, this has been an infuriating week for Texans. The greatest state in the greatest country in the world has been without power. Why? What do you really have? Should we really be thumbing our nose at anyone at this point? Do we need to be doing that? We are hat in hand, asshole. We have had food lines, gas lines, and people sleeping at the neighbors' houses. Nothing, I'll tell you.
That's terrible.
Nothing is worse than community. Of all of it, I fucking hate community. Our homes are freezing. Our lights are out. Like millions of Texans, our family lost heat and power too. Boy, do I not believe that shit.
Ted Cruz doesn't have a generator, y'all.
the idea Ted Cruz is probably like these assholes in Highland Park who never lost power, or the assholes out here in Lakewood who never lost power. We'll see what the investigations yield, but it sure seems like the power, not just in the Foucault sense of the word, but as in the actual electricity sense of the word, works a little bit differently if you're in one of these real estate districts that has a higher net worth. With school canceled for the weeks, our girls asked to take a trip with friends. Wanting to be a good dad, I flew them down last night and I'm flying back this afternoon. My staff and I are in constant communication with the state and local leaders to get to the bottom of what happened in Texas. We want our power back, our water on, and our homes warm. My team and I will continue using all of our resources to keep Texans informed and safe. I had to. I mean, that's a good Ted Cruz, right? I've worked on my Ted Cruz a little bit.
This is pretty good. I wouldn't have attempted the. I don't think my voice can go. I'm gonna have to practice that privately.
It's a tough
voice.
It's a tricky one. But like that one. There, what I've realized is, so it's Southern, like you do the Texas thing, but like he's a phony. He's a schmarm factory, as I think I call him.
Yeah, it's too much South Carolina accent.
It is very similar to Lindsey Graham.
Yeah,
and I do
who has a real South Carolina accent.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. There's there's like two things that are affected into the South Carolina thing, and like that's Lindsey's voice. But with Ted Cruz, you gotta think theater guy. Like, one of the things I remember about him from when he was running is he loves The Princess Bride, and he loves shoehorning monologues from The Princess Bride into public appearances. I'm not joking about this. I'm not joking.
That up.
No, it's horrible. It's like he's such a grating individual. Like when I did that cut for Matt Lewis's show, I was reminded yet again. I'm like, he's the worst. He's like, his politics suck. But even if his politics were great, it would really be a true torture test of like how good can a politics of a person be who is like the most obnoxious human being in the world.
So speaking of the worst. If that statement was valid, we would have one conversation. But if you want to look in your messages, Chris, I sent you two images. One is the statement you just read, and the next image kind of unravels his whole story here. This is from yeah. Spoke to a source at United Airlines, Senator Ted Cruz rebooked his flight back to Houston from Cancun for this afternoon at around 6 a.m. today. He was originally scheduled to return on Saturday.
The thing that is cracking me up is the thing from Kyle Potter that says, and just like that, Ted, in parentheses, Raphael. I honestly, he might forever be Ted Raphael in quotes at Cruz.
Let's start branding him as TRC.
No, I know. I'm into this. Like, because the thing about him is it's just everything about him's fake. Like, he's so inauthentic. You know, it's funny because he liked to go after Beto O'Rourke as Robert Francis O'Rourke. And the popular knockout here on a lot of talk radio is Robert Francis O'Rourke. And like, don't get me wrong. Like, I don't. The Beto thing rings a little hollow to me.
I can hear Gorka doing that.
There's an AM radio guy who, like, sometimes my car, because I use the aux-in cord, sometimes it'll put on the AM radio guy. And I've definitely heard some dude doing Robert Francis O'Rourke. Like,
maybe Levin.
It's not because Levin's up here. I know Levin's voice. And I know Rush's voice too.
But he gets slow right before he explodes.
Yes, yeah. Rush is down here bubbling, and Levin's already exploded. Levin
was down here, sir. Was down here.
Oh no. For visual gag there, I did the pound and pointed up and then corrected myself and went pound, point down, because Rush he ain't upward. He ain't going to the sky. He ain't hanging out there with Kurt Cobain and Jimmy. He's listening to this shitty music, watching Roman Polanski films and well, Polanski's not dead, but you actually still have to watch him down there. That's not how it works. I'm sorry. I don't make the rules. That's metaphysics, bro. But what I was talking about had something to do with Texas, I think. Where was I?
Ted Cruz lied about the
Ted
flight
Cruz
back.
lying about flying back here. Yeah, right. So he lies about flying back here, and you knew it was a lie. Yeah, and the point was he was originally scheduled to be there until Saturday. Books his flight back today, so he didn't have immediate regrets. He might have had immediate regrets when he got on the plane. In this sense, he might have been on the plane, as one of those photographs showed, in his first class section, Mr. Cruz, with your nice cell phone generator right there on the armrest, Mr. Cruz, with the leather upholstery, with the feet that you can put up. He can recline. He had a flight that he could recline on, Mr. Cruz. Raphael, him and his nice family, going on their vacation that they can afford to Cancun, where it was warm. He might have had regrets when he was online and saw, because he has internet access in the first class section, that people were tweeting about him while he was mid-flight. So I don't know how long that flight to Cancun was, or if there was a layover, if he was maybe held up on the tarmac. Because, might have been some bumpy rain getting out there in the snowstorm that he was flying away from.
Also, there were Houston police officers who were asked to escort him to through the airport because the Houston police aren't taxed enough right now during the.
He's the worst. I see red when I think about this guy. Like he's such a horrible human being, and it's visceral for me in this sense. I remember arguing with people in 2018 about Beto O'Rourke being insufficiently pure or not meeting people's sniff test. And every time Ted Cruz does something stupid and people all over the country are like, he's the fucking worst. How could Texas governor do that? Just like, there were two options in 2018. And if you really feel that bad about how Ted Cruz is and you really think he's the fucking worst, and trust me, I do, you need to encourage everyone when people who are as bad as Ted Cruz are on the ballot that you fucking vote for anyone other than Ted Cruz, because you got to get these people out, because there's one and only one way to get rid of people like Ted Cruz.
Yeah, and if you look at what the congressional situation we're in right now and how one vote could make a big difference, I'll tell you something that Ted Cruz and Joe Manchin have in common. They're both going to vote no on Medicare for all. If you want to look at really playing with someone like Manchin, who's playing with us all, we didn't need to replace 5 senators. We needed to replace one of them.
Or have a $1 billion election in Georgia. I'm sorry, $1 billion. No, it was $1 billion. It was $838 million went into that one special runoff. $1 billion election in one state for 2 senators. It's important. I get it. Point being, I as I've been saying for years, people need to take Texas more seriously as a state. Why? Because sometimes our politicians are really stupid. If you don't want them inflicted on the country, you can have a say in that. Much in the same way that I give money to Senate races in the state of Maine or Senate races in the state of Alaska to try to affect the outcomes there. Why do I want to get Murkowski reelected? And I've given to a reelection campaign. Why? Because Lisa Murkowski is actually, from my transactionalist perspective, not that bad. She really isn't. She voted to impeach twice. She voted against Supreme Court justices. She can be counted on to vote for things like the stimulus check. From where I'm standing from, she's better than a Republican alternative on any stretch. So I'll give money to her. in the same way that I'd encourage everyone, I'm not saying give money to Murkowski, but like, yeah, it behooves all of y'all to get bad Republican senators. Cornyn is another one, missed opportunity, and I know he's like less on everyone's radar. He's less personally grating, but he's in Senate leadership. Pulling that guy out of Senate leadership is actually really important. So if you can do that, that's because he might be Senate Majority Leader. You know what I'm saying? So like, it's actually good in the same way, much like AOC. The coolest thing she's done so far as a representative is dethrone Joe Crowley from Democratic leadership. Getting rid of John Cornyn would be really good on that front.
Well, speaking of how big Texas is, I want to kind of connect this back to Rush. Okay. Yeah, salesman.
Stop salesman.
Are you allowed to play songs or like in the mix or like?
I mean,
no, I didn't mean. Okay.
I mean, you know, like. Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
It's there.
Yeah. All right. That was supposed to be.
Anyway.
I haven't played any of those in ages, but yes. What happened in the mix there was some horrible. I won't have to worry about copyright violation. I couldn't even find 7 notes consistently.
Yeah, but you.
I brought the spirit of radio.
There you go. You conveyed the message. So let me tell you a little story here that you're just gonna love. Okay.
Okay.
So way back when, I believe this was Tomball, Texas, for what it's worth.
What a great name! That's like one of my favorite Texas names, Tomball.
So this is the early 80s, and there is a gentleman who owns a very small radio station in Tomball, Texas, who, as many people in the early 80s, they had an 11-to-1 segment, which was doing just terrible. Probably, I think he said the gentleman who owned the radio station was like 40th in like anything that could get ratings from 11-to-1. And so Rush Limbaugh appears out of nowhere, and he's actually calling these small radio stations like this, what this gentleman owns in Tomball, Texas. And they made a contract. They're like, hey, you can't do worse than what we're doing now. And within a few months, the ratings took off. And the person who owned the radio station took off. They eventually sold the radio station, and this individual kept in good relationship with Rush, and they would go to football games together. And that man's name is Attorney General Ken Paxton.
Whoa! That's a great story. I did not see that one coming. And he's also Ken Paxton. Oh, by the way, one of the worst attorney general in the country.
Number one.
He's got to be number one.
He's got to be the most known attorney general in the nation.
Yes, and I'm not even talking about him filing the Stop the Steal lawsuits. I'm talking about they were trying to get him to resign. I mean, even Republicans were calling for him to resign here. Paxton, he's literally right. He's right now white knuckling through all these controversies around him, and he might well survive them.
This was a little story that Ken Paxton retold. Was it yesterday? Yeah, it had to be yesterday. As he is saying how he owes his career to Rush Limbaugh. So if we can,
it's a great anecdote because it's illustrative of conservative radio. Like, it is illustrative of how that boomer generation and like Reagan, post-Reagan conservatism, Gingrich conservatism, if you will. So, like, when people think about Newt, and I know Newt's really past tense at this point, which is crazy because he was young when he came into office. Like, Newt's only like 70. Like, he's younger than you think, but like he's also so old and so stale as a brand that it doesn't matter.
Is Karl Rove as old as him, or are they of the same?
Oh man, that's interesting. Because to your point, there's definitely been in 2000 or whatever, I think Rove's younger than Newt by probably about a decade. But I bet you if you had Newt and Rove next to each other, you'd think the opposite. Or about the same age or the opposite. So yeah, no, so much of boomer Reagan conservatism comes out of Rush Limbaugh. And when you think about Gingrich, I don't think the Gingrich revolution is possible without Limbaugh doing this thing for radio, and doing this thing for talk radio, and helping, to your point, coming in and helping all of these dying AM radio stations and creating a network for all of these AM radio stations. Like, Rush's brand did generate a lot of money for these other people. What they did all day was push out Rush's shit show, and they'd market it, and it turned into these right-wing AM radio stations, and they're like the worst of the crap that like your weird bad uncle listens to, that sort of thing. But that network of bad uncles and crazy stepdads and ex-husbands all over the country helped to form the roots of like fuck your empathy conservatism. This is the same generation of conservatism that described liberals, and started to toxify the word liberal, and make it a bad and uncool word, when it used to be a cool thing. But they also would like toxify them as bleeding hearts, and really making the whole idea of empathy and caring about like, oh, my heart bleeds. Oh, I care. Like they'd make fun of them.
Which is so strange that connected when at the same time they were seamlessly connecting with the evangelical movement. And you
see this tension played out like beautifully in the way pro-life as a phrase has just been reduced to absolute absurdity in the wake of their response to the pandemic. Like conservatives, and particularly pro-life conservatives, some of them have been happy to wear the mantle grandma killer, unironically. And, I'm pro-life, but you can call me a grandma killer if you want. I'm fine with that. Okay.
Pro-life may be about as twisted as the word liberal. I think.
And yet not toxified anywhere near to the same degree. Although it totally 100% deserves to be.
Yeah.
Because pro-lifeism has been demonstrated to not actually be all that good at keeping things alive. An okay mechanism for forcing gestation. Absolutely. I'm not going to argue that point. Keeping things alive and quality of life stuff, yeah, a little bit of a shaky one. So let's finish off on Rush. The big dog, he died. He's gone. Rush is gone.
So how early can you remember listening to him or knowing people who listen, or acknowledging that like maybe people in your family were Rush listeners?
Grandma was a Rush listener. Yeah. My dearly departed grandmama. My introduction into like politics as a thing. My grandmother, who I in weird ways have inherited certain personality foibles that I completely own. Like, she was very into soap operas. I like professional wrestling. She was very into politics as a conservative. I'm very into politics as a fucking liberal. And like at least as into it as her. I don't watch TV news like she does. Actually, I hate it. It's like weird because we're like very bizarro sort of versions of it. But like, I also make a show, and my grandmother would consume endless amounts of political content and never ever in 1,000 years think to make her own show. But I remember Grandma definitely cooking like lasagna and raviolis. Ravioli, that was the best, especially with the brajol, the sausages and stuff, and like getting all that stuff ready. And Rush Limbaugh would be on, and I hated that guy. Like, he just, I didn't even really understand politics. He just sounded like a dick, and he sounded. I didn't know what the word smug was either at the time. But I like arrogant. Like that arrogance vibe off of him was always so inescapable. But like, yeah, I remember Grandma liked Rush Limbaugh. How about for you? Who was the first person, or like, what was your first Rush experience?
Well, uh, I would listen to a lot of AM radio, but that was because my stepdad got me into Art Bell. And like my stepdad would be awake at night and he's like, hey, if you ever can't sleep, turn on Art Bell. You'll hear some crazy shit and might be interesting, but in the process, these people might just talk you to sleep. And they often did. But I think just through scanning through AM radio, I just came across him at some points, but he wasn't really on at night, of course. But I do remember absorbing him to a point where I was like, I can't believe this one guy can just talk and just keep going. And like, as far as just an academic understanding of what he does with communications, it is something to marvel at. But the way he uses this tool as a weapon,
Yeah,
it's just it's
our
just
Phil Davidson avatar line, like, yeah.
man, I just wish there was someone on his level of of radio chops who you could say, well, look, there's someone with those radio chops who's not a terrible person.
Well,
Because
that's how I felt about Cenk Uygur, especially
yeah,
in the
okay,
in the aughts when the Young Turks was getting started, and that was the
yeah,
first time.
promise
Yeah,
for
like,
sure.
because they would do. I mean, he would do 25-minute, 30-minute segs before they take a break, and it would all be unscripted. And he was really, really good. I mean, it. He was angry. In a way that he just simply isn't anymore. And in some cases, like, look, I think that makes us a better, more well-adjusted, and more easy to be around human being for the people in our personal lives. I think though, in the case of on-air radio, especially when you like believe it and you really fucking feel it, and you got the truth on your side. Man, that's so powerful. It's
No,
so
because
powerful.
when there's only one voice and there's not two voices, that one voice turns into your inner monologue.
Yes, yes. I got mindful of that. I still will be doing solo shows here as the show continues. But I got mindful of that when like I was did that one like spate of solo shows because I really wanted to get that under my belt. And then like shit like the Mueller report or whatever actually really made sense as a solo show thing. So it was useful to have that. It's useful to have that as a thing in my arsenal at this point. But I got very mindful of when I was doing those shows. I was like, the audience receives that, and it becomes like the thought. And so I don't have an ethical quandary with that if I've got my research on point. But like, surely Rush knew that, and actually I know that he knew that like he was blowing smoke, and that like he was, which I that makes me so angry. It is to get people's trust and kind of go to the people with heuristics thing. Like, why do I care about this? Like, man, it's about con men, right? Like, a con man it is doing a confidence game. That con is short for confidence. You build confidence with someone, and then after you build confidence, you betray their trust. And Rush Limbaugh, above all else, is a con man. Um, and on that front, he's really a horrible dude. And was a
Big Dan T.
what?
You remember Big Dan T from Oh Brother Where Art Thou?
I don't. I haven't seen that movie in a while though. That's a
Sorry
good.
about that. That
No,
was
no,
quite
no,
a
no.
but
Yeah.
just
Is that Clooney's
headstrong.
character?
It's the John Goodman character.
Okay.
He's the he's got the eye patch. Who is he supposed to be from the story? Uh,
Is he like the
yeah,
Cyclops? Is it because
yeah.
Oh Brother Where Art Thou is like the Odyssey only
The
done.
Odyssey. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Anyhow, yeah, it just reminds me of this guy who is going to rhetorically wine and dine you and just get you at ease. and then once you're at ease, that's when the game really begins. But these people are so slick in that they can incorporate bits of reality and bits of news and bits of knowledge
And bits of narrative.
yes, but then also incorporate bits of narrative that have you putting together pieces that aren't really there.
Yeah, you do the extra work. I'll give you a couple of examples. So you brought feminazi earlier, which he popularized into the vernacular. I brought up bleeding hearts earlier, which is another one he popularized into the vernacular. Here's a lesser known one though, scrool. Remember scrool?
Yeah.
He would say scrool often. And the reason he does it, it's multifold. I was gonna say it's twofold, but I have a feeling I'm gonna come up with more than two, or I could very easily come up with more than two. I'll come up with at least two. So first, it is doing a portmanteau of school and screw, and so the subtext there is school screws with your brain. Doesn't make you smarter. It screws with you. It messes with you. Screw. Yeah, they screw you up. But the other thing that it does, and this is the real genius, and I gotta just credit Sam Cedar on this one because I got this from him, and I was like, oh shit, that is the other thing it does, is it's a mispronunciation that then gets stuck in your brain. Much like when I try to force like really stupid words. What was the mansion? The patricentrism.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Much like when I try to force those type of words. The force is actually what gives it its. Let's just use the word force. It's what gives it its force. The heft comes from me screwing up the word because your brain recognizes an error as something more of note,
authentic, or something worth interpreting.
Examine it. Yeah, right. Like what? Wait, why was that word wrong? Yeah.
For instance,
your antennas go up.
It's why an opera singer would make a terrible rock and roll frontman. Because
among other reasons,
they're too perfect. Yeah, but they're too perfect. Whereas when you have a distinct sound that is technically wrong, but aesthetically,
Iggy Pop is not a guy. Yeah. You don't get Iggy Pop and have him come into the studio and go, all right, now Iggy, what we're trying to do here is a 4-part harmony. We're trying to voice a major seventh. We're trying to forward here into a first inversion. We really don't want that one to be present. Like Iggy, you could probably lead Iggy to do that. I'm not saying Iggy's a bad singer, but what I'm saying is like you get Iggy Pop, like I'm talking like in the 60s, he's like, or in the 70s, he's like, wow, like you're getting him to like do crazy shit, like yeah, absolutely. Although to your point, Sparks is a band that has a very operatic front person. In Russell Mail.
I don't know.
Check it out. This town ain't big enough for the both of us. It's a good one.
Well, I will say that while we're kind of on this, it seems like kind of a side note. I am a fan of the singers who sing straight up more, like Josh Homme from Queens of the Stone Age.
Sure.
One of my favorites is the lead singer from the Cult, Ian
Astbury. Yeah, no, he's great.
Just a beautiful voice. But those people stand out for like, wow, this person's just straight up singing, and it almost comes off as unique just because you're being so just matter of fact with your voice.
One last one on that before we go back to Rush Limbaugh and his impact on radio. But this is a fun tangent. I could stay here for like 10 minutes. Shudder to think. Craig Weidron is like super operatic in his sing style. But like they are fundamentally a noise rock band. Especially like on Pony Express record, which is a great album. Craig Weidron though, on what's the single? It's the first track. If you put it on, you'll hear it. It's a really great example. It's like noisy as hell. Really, really weird chord voicings. Like chords in question marks. But no, but like they're super dissonant and super weird. Like I don't. It's so weird how this band writes their songs. But he's singing in this like super operatic like way on top of it, and it's cool and it totally works. But anyways, back to Rush. The mincing of the words. In addition to creating a mimetic thing, like it becomes a meme that sticks in brains, it also serves as a mimetic narrative delivery device, going back to patricentrism. That allows me to, one, jam that thing into your brain. Two, you remember the narrative. Your brain unpacks the thing. Why did Chris call this thing patricentrism? Well, it was patrician and centrism, and he's talking about how all of the centrists always act like they're doing it from this hill where they can see what America really needs, but it's more like a country club because they're patricians.
So the people educate themselves simply by hearing the word.
Yeah, right. So you can, and you don't even have to explain it in a lot of. What's amazing, and Rush kind of got this, is his audience is dumb but smart at the same time. The brain is amazing in this sense. It will complete the circuits. It will fill in the space that's not there. It's the same reason why, like, if there are typos in a message, your brain I learned my keyboard's broken, so I also here now. But I also learned no one gives a shit. I have never, ever since my keyboard's been broken, I've been sending off shit with double characters all the time for like a year and a half now. No one's ever been like, I don't understand what you just said, because you mentally just remove the extra, parentheses, or you remove the extra A. And you're like, oh, he said apple, not Apple. What is Apple? Apple. I don't know what that is. Yeah. Your brain puts it together. And Limbaugh took advantage of that very effectively.
Yeah, and I think that's like, I feel like there's a Venn diagram between someone like Limbaugh and someone like Frank Luntz, because Frank Luntz is trying to get someone from here to there, but there is always a somewhat
job creators
proposition. Yeah,
job creators is brilliant, right? Like that. That's, to me, it's always gonna be his gold standard. It went from the rich to no. They're not your fucking boss, because everyone hates their fucking boss, and boss has a bad branding, because it should.
Yeah. Calling someone a job creator is disingenuous, but it's not prejudiced the way feminazi.
No, it's disingenuous, but like as I was sort of saying earlier with Paxton and Limbaugh, he sort of is a job creator in weird ways. Where like Limbaugh's, yes, another right-wing talk radio thing could have stepped in there, but also like Limbaugh clearly had some special thing about him too. Everyone always thinks in talk radio, all it is these guys, mostly white dudes, get in front of microphones and they, spout out their thoughts about the world or whatever. And what makes this guy any different from that guy, any different from that guy? And like, it's a thing I think about as a creator myself. It's a thing I think about when I'm thinking, am I going to listen to some other show? Like if I want to get the flavor of like what's going on in the conservative movement, why do I read Kevin Williamson versus Rich Lowry? Well, it's because Rich Lowry like literally has never met a shit sandwich he wouldn't eat, and like Kevin Williamson has some issues, but like also will not eat every shit sandwich you just put in front of him. Why do I listen to this show or that show? Why do I listen to Majority Report and Vouch, but I don't know, not Jacobin, let's say. Like all these things, they're qualitative. So clearly there's some special sauce that Limbaugh had, because there are 1,000 imitators, right? Everyone from Alan Keyes to Mark Levin to Glenn Beck's an inheritor, often imitated, never duplicated. In this sense, like, that's something that I think people in the conservative movement will be looking at and trying to figure out. I don't know if they ever will. Because all they've gotten to so far is he was funny. And I don't think he was that funny.
Well, the branch that I hope does the worst at at filling the void that he has created is the Ben Shapiro Hillsdale College front, and it's really the one that I think is going to gain the most from this void.
You do. Okay. Why do you think Shapiro's the inheritor?
Maybe not necessarily Shapiro, but I know that Shapiro and his attachment to Hillsdale College.
Okay.
I'm concerned that as they keep talking about getting
this
away
builds off
from
a
school,
scroll.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
There's definitely a messaging from McConnell on down about why hasn't Biden got people in schools yet. You can hear on AM radio.
More on that on the next show. I have.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, you can hear on Rush's show with the sub, or when Rush was there a few weeks ago, and other AM radio, people are talking about how easy it is to make a pod and to just homeschool your kids, and you really need to be more open-minded about your children's education because of what these kids are learning at these schools. Yeah, I know you're going to get into that with the next show, but with that,
it's just a big topic. I realized it was going to be an entire episode.
But with that is as you homeschool your children, you're going to need a direction for after their high school diploma is earned, and that's where Hillsdale College is.
And
I'm
also,
I'm worried they're going to scale.
Also, you need to get your kids through an institution of higher learning. And there's a real issue with this homeschooling stuff that these kids are not actually learning enough to make it through college. And in a lot of cases, they have issues transitioning into college, especially on the math side.
And Hillsdale College doesn't take federal money, and so they can have whatever standards they want.
So it's almost like, they'd hate this. It's almost like a Hampshire college, but for the right wing.
I think so.
Yeah, Hampshire College famously does not give out grades, and it's like they do evaluation. It might become more in vogue in teaching at some point. But like they were doing, I'm talking like they were doing this in the '90s and the aughts, like when I was up there. And it's a silly place. Really good drugs there. Great place to party. God, boy, the party's kicked ass, Brian. But I don't know that I'd actually want to like go to school there to like learn how to do like engineering or something, right? Because they might just go like, well, Chris, man, you did pretty good. I know like you don't understand how to solder yet still, but like you tried, dude. But yeah, you'll get it next time.
You end up making roads with sinkholes in them.
Maybe. I don't know, because apparently I don't get to find that out until the next show. Any other thoughts about Rush, or is that the end of the episode here?
I think that's all I got on Rush.
That's all I got. My only regret with him is that he didn't die homeless and penniless like he deserved.
Now, I will say one more thing. If Rush was all about money, $500 million says he got there. And maybe Rush wasn't all about money. Maybe Rush actually had ideals, whether or not I find them ridiculous or not. But if Rush was all about money, he died with $500 million in the account.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that as
you know what's funny about that though is like at the end of it. So he dies with $500 million. Cool. Elon Musk is the richest man in the world, and in like a standoff right now with Jeff Bezos, and like no one will even really note Limbaugh's worth.
By the way, if you want to be surprised, I just heard what Larry King passed away with.
A boner.
How much money do you think Larry King had at the end?
I think he was kind of broke because he was doing all the Russia Today shit.
He was. He had $2 million left. And there's already a former wife who is protesting a hand scribbled will that he did after they were together. Yeah, It's going to be interesting. There's going to be nine
Yeah,
wives fighting over $2 million.
Yeah, no. That no one's gonna be getting much more than $100,000 max out of Larry. No, I mean, I just had to. That's the only reason he was doing the TV is that he had to
Yeah.
because he couldn't afford it. Like,
By the way, he had a infomercial on last night.
yep. No, I'm
That's
sure
kind of weird.
It's yeah, right. That's fucking weird. And he did. Larry did so many of those that you're gonna be seeing a lot of like Larry from the grave for years to come because he did become. It's not like I mean, boy, how prolific is Larry King? Like he was everywhere in like a really major way in
Yeah.
the 80s and 90s, talking to everyone who fucking mattered ever in the 80s and 90s. Like you didn't matter unless you were talking to Larry King.
And so imagine where the right would, where the GOP or where the conservative movement would be right now if they embraced a Larry King type figure instead of a Rush Limbaugh type figure.
But they never would have, right?
Yeah, you're right. I mean,
They
can
never
dream.
would have. Yeah. But to your point, if but like Larry King is just like this vaunted kind of neutral journalist, never would have fully scratched their itch. They wanted the narrative stuff, and like to the point about King like is happy. As he says, I like asking dumb questions, but like he's happy and letting you just be you, and like he'll just take what you're giving him, which I kind of think is cool. Shut up, spam risk. I kind of think is cool, but it is not. It's not the Rush Limbaugh thing. But to the point about Rush, if Rush didn't like you, and this says him and Larry are kind of similar, if Rush didn't like you, you weren't going anywhere. So Trump getting that Rush Limbaugh endorsement was important. And
Yeah.
I think Trump, in his own way, I know everyone's been making fun of how inhumane and detached from like warmth his remembrance of Rush Limbaugh was, where he's like, and Rush was always very supportive of me. But the more important part of that is that Rush was supportive of Trump. And Rush could have said, this Donald Trump guy's a fucking idiot. And like, if Trump had a fight with Rush, that would have screwed Trump's brand up. That would have really hurt him.
If there was one person, if there's one figure that Trump probably sees as paternally instead of fraternally, it's probably Rush Limbaugh. He probably sees Sean Hannity as a brother, probably saw Rush Limbaugh as a daddy.
Yeah, I feel like Shawnee almost views as a little bit of like a subordinate.
Maybe a little brother, a younger brother.
Yeah, younger brother. No, that's not a bad way of putting it. Whereas Rush is very much a gatekeeper. Trump realized that through this door is untold riches, but Rush is the guy because Rush never wanted to run for president. He knew exactly where his layer was. He knew that he was the heuristic. He was the heuristic gatekeeper.
Yeah.
Rush Limbaugh, perhaps the ultimate, if you want to talk about imprimatur of people as heuristics, like when Chris Novembrino thinks about that, Rush Limbaugh is a gold standard. He, at one point, 10% of the country listened to him reliably.
That's why I listened to him.
Yeah. All of whom were conservative and made up a very large minority that voted reliably in one ideological direction, whatever Rush said. So he is like the gold standard of people as heuristics. He's, if you want to talk about, if I was going to write the book about it at some point, and Frieders nudged me to do this, I don't know, maybe I will. But like there would probably be an entire chapter on Limbaugh. I'm not joking. Not because I love him on any level, but like it's sort of it would be incoherent to talk about how people as heuristics affects American politics without talking about the fact that at one point 25 to 30% of the Republican electorate would vote in any direction that Rush Limbaugh told them to. And they had family members who were largely Republican and would dominate the conversations with them. And Limbaugh also gave all of these people a rhetorical framework to bully their way through the conversations to force their conservatism over other more genteel forms of conservatism, country club Republicans and that sort of thing. What's up?
I got nothing.
Okay.
Well,
Well,
no, I'm done with Rush.
Burn in hell, you horrible, horrible man. That's all I had. No, fuck him. He used to
Yeah.
revel in the deaths of others. People who
Yep.
were innocent and good people. I mean, it's whether it's playing music montages as he's reading off the death list to AIDS. I'll never love again or whatever. I'll never love that way again. I think was the music that played in the background. I
Uh-huh.
mean, whether it's cracking jokes about black people dying, whether it's calling Sandra Fluke a slut for wanting to get an abortion. Or actually, no, I'm sorry, not even wanting, but when I say wanting to get an abortion, I mean like trying to fight for others to get access to having, medical
Oh,
liberty.
I'll tell you a little something here that I encountered. There's a Joe Rogan Facebook group. I'll let your mind wander on that. But I was curious what their reaction would be on the Rush Limbaugh story about relating to him celebrating the death of the uh, AIDS victims. Uh, and they were like, "Well, do you have audio of him saying this? Like from the 1980s? Do you have audio?" I was like, I just saw this conversation unraveling. Found an LA Times article that directly connects this segment that he had and speaks directly to it. And they're like, "Yeah, but either you have the audio or I really don't believe that it happened."
Yeah, I've realized what that move is, right? It's the infinite solicitation of evidence, and it is either you go, well, I just want a piece of evidence that's indisputable, and you ask for it knowing full well that the piece of evidence that you're asking like logically wouldn't exist, and it's not because it didn't happen, it just like wouldn't happen. Like, well, I mean, like, look, there's a cell phone camera that was in the guy's lapel and he actually had a videotape of the incident, and it's like, well, he was wearing a fucking t-shirt, so like here's there's audio of him in the car. Is that enough for you? I don't know, man. That's just audio tape. Like it's just it's goalpost moving by any other
Yep.
name. Yeah,
Yep.
no, and yeah. To
But I
that
thought you would
well, it's
be.
like the Capitol riots, right? Like the Capitol riots really sort of put this into stark contrast, where you're having how much video has been produced on this, and you still have people arguing, "Oh no, it wasn't an armed thing.
Yeah.
There weren't weapons in the Capitol. The fuck, there weren't." Um, Anyways, Rush Limbaugh, eat shit, die. Yeah, at least you died. My only regret's that you can't eat more shit. Also that you didn't die 20 years earlier, and also not penniless and not homeless. Any other final thoughts? That's it.
No, I'm trying to find this pothole story in the
No,
nature
that's
at
how
its
you get on
strangest.
the show the next time.
I was
It's
teased about it when
hot
it covered.
takes or pothole stories, baby. I want one or the other. So Brian, where can people find you on the internet if you want to tweet out some of this content from this book or the sketches?
Nature at its strangest.
I'm sorry, at least the drawings, right?
Yeah, I should get the drawings out there. No, I'm at Postman RTs, at Postman Retweets. I'm currently doing a little bit of research. You and I talked about how I'm looking at John Quincy Adams and his involvement in the disappearing quorum and stuff like that, trying to find some moments of absurdity when people no longer put up with the idea of you saying you're not there when you really are. It's a nice little absurd thing, and eventually I'm noticing everyone says this is absurd, but along the way I'm wondering who stands up for this absurd notion and who doesn't. I hope to have something to produce other than this question soon.
Word. As for me, you can find me at DWATG. You support the show if you want to watch the video. You can see the raw version of this, including an exhilarating minute and a half, 2 minute pause around the 51-minute mark here in this video. I really took my breath away. And you can see that on patreon.com/DWATG. Get the video versions of the show, the raw versions of the show. And, of course, support the show. Bucket Show is all we ask. If you've enjoyed the last 500 shows, hey, why not now? Like help me help me keep going on this dream. $1 a show, $1 a show. There will never be a Ryan Knight. $20 only the means of production level of don't worry about the government. I will never shine your ass on that you're starting a revolution. I do work. For this work, I ask for $1. I hope is at least worth your hour and a half. And the production and the extra stuff is worth it. And if it was, $1 a show is all I ask over at patreon.com/DWATG or on PayPal or on Cash App using the cash tag Chris Nove. So those are your options. Anything else? That's it. Thank you so much for listening. And until the next one, bye-bye.